I hope you're all bundled up tonight because it is only 9.1 degrees outside. That's Fahrenheit. Yeah, it's pretty cold. But the benefit of that is the ski resort across the street from my house is making snow at a rocket pace, as you'll see in just a moment. Let's zoom in on that action. Those are polecat fan guns. I've seen one up close. They're pretty cool. They're very simple too. Just a bunch of water jet nozzles and a high-powered fan. It's pretty neat. But they've been having a very rough go at it this year. The unseasonably warm temperatures. For example, I was riding my motor scooter on Christmas Day. Have really done a number on the ski resorts up in New Hampshire and even north of here. They really haven't been doing much business because there has been absolutely no snow because it's been too cold to make snow. But that's not what we're here to discuss. What I have for you today is a Macintosh PowerBook 230. This is actually a Duo 230, my bad. The Duo series was the spiritual successor to the original PowerBook 100. The PowerBook 100 was actually the first laptop to be labeled a PowerBook. It was the successor to the Macintosh Portable. Fun fact, if you wanted a portable Macintosh, right around the time the Mac Portable came out and before the PowerBook 100 was released, and even after, I believe, there were actually companies selling electronically compatible Macintosh laptops that were not really Macintoshes. See, how it worked was, if you wanted a portable Mac, you had to go out and buy a brand new or a used Mac with an authentic Apple ROM, and you buy this laptop for the price of a full laptop, and you pop in your Apple ROM chip into the laptop, turning it into a fully featured Macintosh portable computer. And the only reason they were able to get around that or get away with this was because they were not copying Apple ROM chips. You had to use one from a real Mac. And you couldn't buy them separately. You couldn't just go to Apple and say, yeah, I just want a ROM chip. They wouldn't sell it to you. Fun fact. It wasn't until then that Apple realized that they were ignoring a completely ripe for the picking portable computer market, which in the early 90s was booming, or just beginning to boom. What they realized is that people wanted to take their computers on the go. And the only choices they had were to buy a used Mac Portable, a PowerBook 100, or something new, which at the time consisted of the 140, 170, 180 series. In October of 1992, Apple released two PowerBook models, the Duo 230 and the Duo 210. We're going to focus on the 230 for this video, which is what we have here. The Duo 230 was discontinued in July of 1994, and also was available with several other models that kind of came and went throughout the Duo's life cycle. Such models include the 250, the 2300C, the 280, and the 280C. There could be other models, but I can't think of them at the top of my head. I've actually owned every one of those, I believe. I know I've had a 2300, and I know I had a 210 at some point in my life. And one of the things I never really liked about the Duo was the fact that, like the PowerBook 100, it really was a true sub-notebook, and it didn't have any built-in removable disk drives, and it had no ports. When the MacBook Air came out, people were in absolute uproar over the lack of ports on the MacBook Air. I believe it had one USB port, and that was it. Well, if you think that that was a new idea that Apple just pulled out of thin air, you are mistaken. The PowerBook Duo was in fact the spiritual predecessor. No, it really was the predecessor, in fact, not even spiritually. It literally was the predecessor of the MacBook Air. And let me show you what I mean. If you look in the back of the machine, there is a docking port. We'll get into that in a bit. But it only featured, from the factory in its default configuration, a single serial port. Notice the pattern here? Just one serial port. It could be used for a modem or a printer or serial communication, but nothing else. On the other side, if you were rich enough and you had the money to buy this, you could have actually added a modem. And I believe it was a I think it was a 14.4 modem, if I'm not mistaken. In 1993-92, 14.4 was pretty much the de facto standard. 33.6 was the standard in 96, 97, and then 56K was pretty much the standard after that, and remains to be the standard today. Yes, you can still buy a 56K modem, and people still use them. Now, this port in the back, this is a docking station port that has access to the entire system bus, meaning it can be used for anything. Anything your heart desires. So a lot of people would buy one of the many versions of the PowerBook Duo dock. Actually, the mini docks, I'm sorry. The mini docks are the affordable option for the everyman. This was not a laptop for the everyman, but for the everyman of the laptop owner class, the Duo Dock Mini was pretty much what you were stuck with. The Duo Dock Mini came in a variety of different flavors, and they had various types of ports available on them. The Duo Dock came in, I believe, one of the biggest options that they had was the availability of a SCSI HDI30 SCSI port, a floppy disk drive port, because you had to buy the floppy disk drive separately. It didn't come with the dock. You would actually be able to add an ADB port. Say that 100 times. Which would give you, of course, your desktop keyboard and mouse capabilities. Some of them even had display ports on the back. Not display ports like the modern display port, but they would be 15-pin Apple monitor ports. But one dock, which remains the king of all laptop docks, in fact, I can't think of a single one made today or even in the past that even equates to this damn thing. It was the coolest thing ever. The Duo Dock, the official Duo Dock, was a giant desktop device. It almost looked like a Macintosh Performa with a giant slot in the front. And it operated much like a VCR. You would take your Duo, so you're coming home from work, you take your laptop and you stick it into this dock, which has a monitor on top of it, a keyboard and mouse, a printer, external hard disk drive, external floppy disk drive, and God only knows what else, including a couple of new bus ports for your other expansion accessories, including a floating point unit which would add to the computer's math coprocessing capabilities. Holy shit, that was the best dock you could buy. It basically turned this lowly, puny little machine into a fully featured desktop powerhouse. And if you want to see one in a TV show, you can certainly do that by tuning into season 6 of Seinfeld, where actually you'll notice where either his 20th anniversary Mac or his Macintosh Classic, depending on which season you're watching, is generally visible in the very back corner of his living room on top of the desk. So if you watch Seinfeld and you see this odd-looking, can't quite place it computers on the desk, you are looking at a PowerBook Duo dock with a Duo installed and one of many flavors of Macintosh monitors that were available in the mid-1990s. That was a mouthful. What are the specs? Well, I want to talk about screen technology for a second. I actually made a nice little outline for myself. Screen technology varied based on the model of the Duo that you purchase. The original Duo series, the 210 and the 230, which is what we have here featured what was called a monochrome dual scan display, or DSTN, that's dual scan twisted pneumatic. Those displays were among the worst laptop displays available in the history of laptops. A lot of times you complain about the video quality or the refresh rate or frame rate or whatever people complain about some of the modern displays on lower end laptops. But nothing holds a candle in terribleness to the DSTN displays, except for, and there was one display that was much worse. In fact, it was so bad, any laptop that has one is practically unusable, was the original STN monochrome display. The STN monochrome displays were single scan. And I'm going to go over that in just a moment when we power this sucker up and you see it live for the first time on video. There was actually an even worse one. I'm just thinking about this now. When the dual scan color displays came out, they were usually installed on lower end laptops. Dual scan and active matrix are very different in how they process or how they display images. I suggest you Google it because I'm not even going to try to explain it. I know how it works, I know the difference, but getting it into words is like not going to happen. I'm going to miss some important detail and I'll be bashed over the head repeatedly in the comments box. So I'd rather not waste my time. So go ahead and use Google or Wikipedia and Google DSTN, STN, or Active Matrix TFT displays and the technologies that drive them. But the color DSTNs were so bad. I've had many of them. Like I said, they were generally found on lower end laptops. Like, for example, the compact Contora, which I've had many of. Oh my God, were they bad. Oh boy. You couldn't even do word processing on those suckers. So, the original Duos featured DSTN monochrome monitors. Later versions, I believe the 280 and the later version of the 230 featured an active matrix grayscale or an active matrix color display. And those were pretty good displays. Active matrix technology brought an otherwise unusable laptop display into something a little more usable and very easy on the eyes. PowerBook 170, if you really want a good example of how much the display technology matters, take a PowerBook 170 and a PowerBook 140, put them next to each other and compare the two. It's just night and day. There was one model of the Duo. It was actually the very last of the Duo series, the Duo 2300C, which I've owned one, and I gotta tell you, it was a terrific little laptop, but only if you had the Duo dock, and that's where I'm going to stop on that. Now the Duo dock, as I mentioned earlier, was like a giant VCR. It did in fact provide full desktop capabilities to the Duo series. And like I said before, it also included 2 new bus slots. So you could really do anything with the Duo. Because the specifications weren't too bad on these laptops. It was a Motorola 68030 running at 33 megahertz, so it was equivalent to maybe what was my last, it was equivalent to like a PowerBook, I think the 180 or the 160 series in terms of speed. I believe the 170 was a 16 megahertz 68020, although I'm not quite sure. I'd have to look it up, but in either case, it was a pretty well-featured machine. The hard disk drive, now these used a 2.5-inch SCSI drive, which is something that Apple, I believe they were the only laptop manufacturer to ever use those, which is why they're so damn hard to find today. The 2.5-inch SCSI drives, you need one for a laptop, good luck. They're very hard to get, unless you buy a working laptop and scrap it, which is a sin, which I've had to do. I sinned. Lord, forgive me. I have sinned. But I have sinned. I've actually scrapped a perfectly good Duo 210 for its hard drive to fix my 170. In terms of Mac OS compatibility, this machine will run OS 7.1 through 7.6.5. 7.6.1, I'm sorry. 7.6.1 down to OS 7.1. The 2300C, which was the best Duo you could buy, was good for up to OS 8. One of the things that made this laptop famous were its many cameos on television and in movies. If you've ever watched Seinfeld Season 6, as I mentioned before, you will see the Duo in its dock, but you won't see it out of the dock. For that, you're going to want to watch News Radio. I believe Season 2, some of the earlier episodes had a different laptop, but after Season 1, 2, and 3, and 4, I actually think the entire series, except for the first couple episodes, featured a PowerBook Duo of some version. I believe they went through a couple of different models, which all look basically just like this one, especially on camera. But it was also used in the movie Hackers, and possibly something else. I'm not sure what. I've seen these, in random places on TV. But Hackers was one of the movies it was used in. Much like how they use a lot of current Apple products in TV and movies. I mean, Apple pays a good amount of money to have their products featured. The only time you'll know they didn't pay is when the Apple logo is obscured. One example of that is the iMac in, not Big Bang Theory, but the other one, the Ashton Kutcher one, 2.5 Men. That's it, 2.5 Men. That iMac is actually, the Apple is obscured from the back. I've actually seen that computer in person when I was actually, and I had attended a live taping of that show, the beginning of the 2013 season. I actually was there. And yes, it is a real iMac. It is obscured, so Apple didn't pay any licensing fees. They just needed a computer for the set, and they picked one that looked nice, and they didn't bother to Apple didn't bother to pay to have that Apple logo show. All right, let's get down to it. This particular machine came to me when a friend of mine calls me up and says, I got a bunch of PowerBooks I don't want anymore. Would you like some? I'm like, sure, why not? I got too much stuff here, but yeah, I'll take them, whatever. I'm like the rescue home for old computers. This particular person he's starting to collect certain models. He actually owns a 20th anniversary Mac, which I'm hoping one of these days to do a video on. It won't be in my house, it'll be in his house, but he actually did go out and buy one. I think he paid, he probably paid like $2,000 for it. I mean, he paid a lot of money for it, more than I'll ever pay for a machine. But I'm planning on hopefully doing a video on that eventually. I'll have to ask him if he'd be willing to do it. But I want to give a quick, because he was kind enough to give me these old Macs. I want to definitely give him a quick plug for his website, DerekHugger.com, DerekHugger. DerekHugger.com. He actually designs and sells plans for kinetic sculptures, and just check it out. It's the coolest thing ever. And one of his designs is actually becoming a viral hit on the internet. It's called Colibri. Colibri is a kinetic sculpture that's driven by a motor of a, I guess you'd probably call it a mechanical sculpture of a hummingbird feeding off of a flower. So this bird is just every aspect of its movement is carefully engineered. And the idea is you would see this video and you're supposed to buy the kit, which includes plans on how you can make it, but doesn't include parts. And then you go ahead and build it yourself. But it's definitely one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And I suggest you check it out. And if you decide to buy any of his plans, tell him BBISHOPPCM sent you. So, let's get down to brass tacks. One thing I could never figure out When people say that, is it brass tacks? Or is it brass tacks? Let me know. Let me know in the comments box. I'd love to know what that is. I use that expression all the time, but I don't know what it means. I could look it up, but I'm too lazy. All right, let's fire it up. I did pull the full system specs off everymac.com, so we'll go over that too. One of the condition issues that I have with this laptop is that the rubber on the display bumpers and the feet is turning to mush, and that happens. Unfortunately, it's going to happen to everything. Everything we have in our in the technology collection world. But rubber, or at least the whatever material they used on these bumpers, tends to degrade over time. It can be replaced, but you have to find the right color and thickness of adhesive rubber and replace it, which might be kind of impossible. But nothing's impossible if you truly believe. So I want to go on record as saying these have one of the worst keyboards of any laptop I've ever used. However, there's a fix for it. So I just want to mention this because there are a lot of people that collect old MacBooks and even PCs that use an older style keyboard design which is based on plungers. It's kind of built like a miniaturized desktop keyboard. Modern laptops use a very different approach to keyboard design. They use silicone bumpers or silicone cones that collapse, and they provide the springiness to the key, and the key actually rides on a scissor jack-like assembly. The problem with the older keyboards is that the plungers, because they're so thin to make the design compact and lightweight, the key is sensitive to being cocked off to the side, and they jam up, like this L key. If I don't hit it just right, or if I hit it at the wrong angle, it doesn't depress. Look. And it jams up. So if I'm touch typing, I have a condition what is called floating keys. Like, for example, this bracket key, or the left arrow, whatever the fuck it's called. This key, the period key, this key, it would not depress. I went to go press it down and it wouldn't move. And the L key, same thing. But these keys, the A, the S, the D, F, all the way to G, yep, not quite G, these are okay because I've already fixed these. I'm going to show you once and for all how to fix these keyboards, and it doesn't cost anything. Okay, what you've got to do first is you've got to remove the key. We're going to remove the period and the comma keys because they seem to be the worst. I suggest using 2 small flat blade screwdrivers to provide an even upward motion. That way the key isn't forced to one side, possibly damaging the plunger. I'm also going to show you what the real defect is. So I'm going to pry the key up gently as it pops up. I'm going to do the other one as well. Making sure not to scratch the key on the sides or to harm the rubber membrane underneath. The Duo keyboard is actually a pretty well-designed keyboard when you really think about it. And I'll show you why. It has good and bad points. The rubber membrane that is underneath the key provides 2 things. It provides the spring action that's needed when you depress the key, but it also shields the keyboard underlying surface or switches from moisture or dust contamination. Pretty cool. The thing is, you could spill a little bit of liquid in this keyboard and it will not get under the keyboard. No laptop made today that I'm aware of has that solid of a design. Some are better than others, but this one is probably the best for shedding moisture and liquid exposure. But here's the problem. These plungers are very small, which means that they're highly prone to being depressed they're prone to the key kind of cocking off to one side when it's depressed. When the keyboard is brand new, this ABS plastic is still very supple and very oily. There's a lot of oil in this plastic, which is what gives it its lubricity, or lubrication. What happens is, when the plastic begins to age and the keyboard begins to wear due to heavy use, that lubrication goes away. So unless you press the key directly on the head, rather than to the side, the key is going to get stuck. So what I've come up with, and I've tested this theory a few times on a few different laptops over the years, is I've taken a little bit of Vaseline. This stuff is like the cure-all for everything, I find. I use it for so many different non-medical applications, mainly for lubricating VCRs, for example. I've used it for fixing keyboards. It's just great stuff. But I found that it lubricates plastic parts really well, almost better than lithium grease. And I learned this when I had my Toshiba T3200SX back in 1998, 97 in fact. And what happened was it had a plastic plunger that interlocked with the display housing. So when you close the display, it hits a long switch, and it would turn the display off to prevent it from overheating. Until one day, I went to go close the screen, and it made a snapping sound, and it just kept doing that. I'm like, what the hell's wrong with it now? So I took the machine apart, and I found that the plunger was coated in like a dust, which is basically worn plastic dust. I coated it lightly with Vaseline, and it worked fine ever since. But anyway, you take a little bit of Vaseline and you just kind of rub it into the plunger socket. It's not going to hurt anything. It's also not toxic. So it's pretty safe to do this. Not that, toxicity is really a concern when you're using a laptop that is basically a battery bomb waiting to happen. But then you just pop the key back in. You can also apply it to the plunger itself if you wish. If you must. But you'll notice that the Vaseline is thin enough. Oh, did I put that in upside down? No, I did not. The Vaseline is thin enough to not hinder the key travel, but it's thick enough to allow lubrication when the key is hit off to the side. This one is still a tad bit sticky. Maybe not. Oh, maybe it is. But this one must be excessively worn out. Remember, this is the period key. So this key, along with the return key, the A key, the S key, these are generally some of the highest wearing keys. But it's still passable. It doesn't jam up like it was. So I could actually touch type on this now. But this M key, not happening. It's too sticky. But if I were to do that fix, I'd have a good working keyboard. Now you know. When looking at a used PowerBook Duo 230, you have to look at a couple of different factors. If you're buying one without the docking station, without any form of docking station, or without the external floppy drive, you're basically buying a brick. There are ways to move data in and out of a PowerBook Duo, but it's through serial connection only, unless you have one of the docks with either a SCSI port or a floppy port and a floppy drive. With a SCSI port, you can always connect an external SCSI drive and just move data quickly in and out of the machine. But when it comes to reloading an OS from the floppy disks, you're pretty much stuck using an external floppy drive, but you may have to buy that separately, and they may be hard to find based on the market conditions. One more thing I want to point out before we get to powering it on. I know you guys are getting anxious, but you know what? I got stuff to do. I got stuff to say, man. You got to hear it. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. Retrobrighting is a great thing for white plastics. It is not a good thing for gray plastics. You might not think that gray plastics can discolor like the white plastics do. For example, this image writer, which has lightly discolored, but not to a point where it needs to be retrobrighted. But gray plastic turns an ugly shade of brownish gray. It's really not appealing. This battery cover had that problem, and it's for the same reason that white plastics discolor, because of the bromine. It leaches into the surface and it oxidizes. Unfortunately, the gray plastic doesn't respond to retrobright in a favorable way. This is what happened to it. Derek Hugger from DerekHugger.com, the mechanical genius behind Colibri, thought what most of us would think, that I can just simply retrobrite it and it'll be fine. Unfortunately, he took one for the team and learned it the hard way. You cannot retrobrite gray plastic. This is what happened to the battery cover. It is permanently scarred for life. It actually turned kind of a silvery color. And I believe that is because the UV rays, which would have removed the bromine oxidization, actually faded out the gray pigment. And you can see where it dried and where the liquid remained. That's another rookie mistake when retrobriting. You cannot allow it to dry. You have to be very careful. He actually used hair cream or some kind of a bleaching cream, and which has been proven to be a fairly solid method. The problem is he let it dry, and it was allowed to be out there unattended for way too long. But that is a quick cautionary tale. If you're looking at retrobriting, don't do it on gray plastics. Just live with the discoloration if you can. One more thing I want to point out. I know. I'm sorry. I am sorry. We'll get to it. We'll get there. Just hang tight. The plastic casings on the Duos are particularly susceptible to breakage on the front clips. There's little plastic clips that actually interlock from the top into the bottom, and they break off very easily when disassembling these. If you haven't disassembled one before, be very careful and don't try to force anything. Remember, the plastic is getting old and brittle just like a grandma, and you can easily damage the plastic clips that hold these together. And once you do, you're basically SOL in terms of structural integrity. Also, the display hinges on these are notorious for breaking. If you grab one of these by the display lid and you hear any creaking or groaning or cracking sounds, run away. Run away. Don't buy it, just run. Because just like the PowerBook 140 and above models, the threaded brass inserts tend to bust free of the plastic that they are encased in very, very easily. And part of that reason is, again, ABS plastic. As it ages, it gets brittle and it can shrink in some cases. And also, the hinges themselves begin to stiffen up, and that's when they need to be heated and bathed in oil. One of these days I'll do another video on that, but it is something that you should do on almost any old laptop hinge, especially if it feels stiff, and that'll prevent it from breaking off your precious, precious threaded brass inserts. Without further ado, did you hear it? She roars to life. Listen to that old 2.5-inch SCSI drive. Ah, yes. Booting right up. Now I got fortunate with this one. It has a good functioning trackball, and the retainer ring is still intact. A lot of times these rings get lost or broken. And in extreme cases, the trackballs themselves can be lost and or stolen. Never fun. Never fun. But here we are at the desktop. It boots real fast. This machine has what appears to be the original hard drive. It sounds like the original drive. It's got a total of 4 megs installed, which, according to my chart here, 4 megs is the factory standard configuration. It says it has a total of 8 megs, but that's only because it is caching up to 8 megs of RAM. I believe this drive to be, let's see if I can get info on that, 45 megs on disk. It doesn't show me how much free space there is, though. 48,000 bytes used, 48 million bytes used, so 45 megs on disk. I believe this is the stock 80 meg disk drive. In fact, if I look at the everymac.com specs, which I told you I'd go over, this was offered 9.1 inch grayscale, 640 by 400 resolution, 80 or 120 meg drive, and I believe this machine has the 80 meg drive. Judging from the low amount of memory, it certainly wasn't one of the upper end models, and the lack of a modem. Usually if you find one with a modem and more memory, it probably means the original owner was something of a power connoisseur, so, or somebody who would spend more money on little things like that. Oh, those are actually pretty big things. Now that we have the machine powered up, I can now show you what a DSTN display looks like. It's definitely not pretty. I can adjust the contrast, but you can see most of the problems with these as you go to the extremes. To the low contrast, you can actually see the dividing line. Remember, dual scan means that both halves of the display are driven independently. And what that actually does is it improves screen response. I have used a single scan display, and let me tell you, they're bad. You actually start getting almost like waves moving from the top corner to the bottom corner here. I'm specifically recalling the compact Contora Aero that I had very briefly, and it actually had a pretty nasty, like an ocean wave. If you look at it wrong, it was pretty disgusting, actually. As we go up in the contrast, you can see that it washes out real fast, and you can actually see lines interconnecting all the objects. Now, this is a single display, a single scan display, my bad. The lines that outline the trash can would move all the way to the top. All the menus that pop up, you would be able to see all the way through the display. And dual scan displays prevented that from being an issue. So these are actually improved. Look at this. If I open up the view menu, you see how small that menu really is, and look at how far visible it is down the screen. Look at that. On a single scan, it would be all the way down to the very bottom. Not a pretty picture at all. But look at that. And you can see with the file menu, it goes beyond that dividing line, and you can really see what it looks like. It's just bad news. But it doesn't mean there's a defect, it just means it's a dual scan display, and that's about what you can expect from those, even when they're brand new. In terms of brightness, for something that is nearly 25 years old, this isn't so bad. You know, it actually achieves full brightness. But if you achieve full brightness for more than a 4-hour period, you should see a doctor. That was a joke. Sorry. Had to. Couldn't resist. But there is some impact damage. There is some bad news. This has a cracked polarizer. Right here, it may not be entirely cracked, but there's definitely some impact damage right there. If I turn the brightness or the contrast way up, you can probably see it better. Or not. Yeah, it's coming into view. Oh, there we go. You can see it right there. Look at that. That's really sad because this has a good display. It doesn't have any tunneling going on. It doesn't have any other issues. The brightness is pretty darn good. and the image quality is as good as it gets. If this were a crack, if I put a little bit of pressure on it like this, it would grow. It doesn't appear to be growing. So I think it's okay. It's at least stabilized, but now you can see my thumbprint. Yeah, it's good. It'll go away eventually. Twist it. You can see that something hit it at one point. Yeah, now it's back to normal. But yeah, these displays were pretty bad, but they were okay for, you know, word processing, spreadsheets, you know, productivity type stuff. But if you were into playing games, you would not want this laptop. You would want to spring for the active matrix model, which would have much better display response. This doesn't really have much for applications loaded, but let's take a look what it has. I think it has Office on it. Let's take a look. Applications, we've got Eric Solitaire Sample, we've got Excel 4.0, FileMaker Pro 2.1, HyperCard 2.1, Player, The Incredible Machine. I actually have this game somewhere. Let's take a look at what Word 5.0 looks like, shall we? Let's see what Word 5 looks like. 1991. 1991. Damn. That was a long ass time ago. This is what Word 5.1 looks like. Look at that. It's a Hail Mary pass from what we have today. Very, very sparse menu. Look at the fonts. This is all you had for fonts. And you couldn't, I mean, these were true type fonts. They were screen ready fonts, but you can't see any preview of these fonts. I mean, look at that. Palatino. That's what Palatino looks like. Man. Yeah, these are, what's the term I'm looking for? WYSIWYG. That was Apple's big selling point. See what Chicago looks like. But I have to type out a phrase. Hey, the return key doesn't work. Well, it kind of does. Let's pop the return key off and see what's going on. Because if nothing else, I may actually go out and try to find another PowerBook 230 and use this one for parts. That's actually something I'm legitimately considering. It looks like the return key is missing one of the clips that holds down the leveling bar. Well, that would explain it. Let's give it some grease. Let's grease that sucker. Pop some grease in there. See if we can smoothen it out a little bit. But you'll notice on the return key, this little tab here should be here too, but it's not. It's completely missing. So this just turned into a parts keyboard. Sorry guys. Huh. Oh well. But no, the laptop is in pretty rough shape overall. Not museum grade. You know, certain aspects of it can be fixed with the right donor parts, but yeah, the key's shot. Not much I can do about that. But what was I going to do? Yeah, we're going to demonstrate the Chicago font, shall we? This camera is getting hot. And not in a good way. There's Palatino, there's Chicago. I don't think these fonts are on modern Macs anymore. I know that Geneva was definitely a Mac font. I mean, that was on every Mac since ever. Helvetica. So yeah, you got a few choices. Alright. Well, that's all I've got to show for you today. All I'm going to show you today. Until then, keep your old PowerBooks running because you never know when we're going to need them for a zombie apocalypse. Have a nice day. Oh, there's one more thing I want to go over. If you're in possession of an old PowerBook with the original SCSI hard drive, you're going to notice it does one little thing. It's a minor annoyance, but it sounds like the drive is broken. I assure you it's not. These drives feature an auto parking feature. It was actually an improvement over earlier designs where the heads would remain on the platter at all times. It was designed to prevent disk damage or reduce the likelihood of such. What happens is, let's see if I can, we'll do it, we'll access some data. I'll open up the incredible machine. Hear that? That click? That click is the heads automatically parking. That's all it is. Exactly. Dynamics. There it goes again. Hear it? It's not a defect. It was part of the Quantum Go Drive series automatic parking feature. I'll bring the volume up a little bit. I want to see how loud it goes. There's always more. Quack. You know, I should copy this application off the machine. I'll figure out a way to do it. I can do it over serial. That I know I can do. I have the PC version, but not the Mac version. So it's a pretty fun game. It's like a mousetrap building game. It's like basically a critical thinking application. Anyway, thought I'd share that with you guys. Alright, well, that's all we have for now. Thank you for watching, and again, this is really it. I'm not doing any more. We're done. Till next time, guys.